Mr. Rivera.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The city master plan process has been completed and has evaluated the existing water distribution system, wastewater and storm collection system for the city. The master planning process conducted by QK and Carollo Engineering investigated existing and potential future deficiency for all systems and recommend improvements to ensure the city has adequate facilities to support future growth as defined in the current adopted general plan, as well as anticipated development. We have present our city engineer, Jeff Carr at QK, and via Zoom, staff from Carollo Engineers, Joaquin Ramirez, Ryan Orgel, and John Witter. I will now turn this over to our city engineer, Jeff Carr.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. Glad to be here with you today. We are going over the 3 master plans, a lot of information. We're going to try to get through it really quickly. So we'll be flipping through here pretty quick. We're going to try to get done, give you plenty of time at the end to ask any questions. So if we skip over something or whatever, we come back to it afterwards. So just if you have a question in between, you can let us know. We'll pause and answer that question. But as Frank mentioned, QK partnered with Carollo to prepare the master plans. Carollo prepared the water and wastewater master plans, and QK prepared the storm drainage master plan, which is what we're going to go over right now. The storm drainage master plan. So the there we go. So the goals and objectives of the storm drainage master plan were basically to evaluate the existing system, capacities, capabilities, and deficiencies in that system, and then determine any necessary improvements to address those deficiencies going forward. The next part was to look at future growth in the city. What type of improvements do you need to have to accommodate the future growth? And then next was look at next steps we're looking at funding those improvements as we go forward. This is the obligatory technical portion of the engineering side of it. I'm going to skip through it really quickly, but the city does use a modified rational method for determining stormwater flow and storage requirements. We use a 10-year, two-day event, which is 3.32 inches for our detention basins, and the 5.68, which is a 100-year event for our retention basins. We use certain runoff coefficients for the various land uses based on the percent of impervious area. So if we got more roof area, parking lot, pavement, concrete, the more water runs off, we have to pick that up. So commercial industrial warehouse, we assign a 0.8, basically about 80% of it will run off. Residential would be 0.4 and 0.7. Sorry for that. And so a little bit lower runoff coefficient. Our pipelines are then designed for the intensity of storm for residential on a 2-year storm, 1107 inch per hour for catch basins and pipelines, and 5-year storm for commercial industrial areas. The city relies on basins for storage of its stormwater. There are 2 types: retention basin, which just basically holds the water, and the only way it just has no outlet, so it just evaporates and percolates into the ground, and that's why it's designed for a larger storm to allow for that. The detention basin, which is predominantly what the city uses, has an outlet designed to be pumped out within a 96-hour period, basically 4 days, and they're pumped out to the Lemoore Canal and various irrigation ditches that are going through Lemoore. Those are based on design from the master plan, your stormwater management plan, and also the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. That basically has some requirements on it that are multifaceted. It goes through public education and what not to dump in the storm system, through temporary construction measures to reduce erosion, and also for design of the basins. So these are the design criteria that we've used going forward with the previous and in this update to your master plan. So let's look at your existing storm drain system. The existing collection system, which is basically shown here, all the red lines are your pipelines throughout the city, serve about 5,400 acres in the city limits. Generally, it works, it operates and functions well. It's maintained and operated well by staff and is well maintained. So the existing pipelines are shown, the basins in blue, and the black dots are your pump stations. The yellow highlighted, which are kind of hard to see, but you have some along 18th Avenue north of 198. We're going to be talking about that's downtown high school improvements. There's a little bit along the north side of Highway 198 out to the West Hills College area, which is the also we're calling the agricultural commercial improvements. And then also the Hess Basin, which is down south of 198 along 19th. Has some yellow area there to improvements to allow for drainage down to the Hess Basin. Next slide is the existing storm drain lift stations that you have within the city of Lemoore. You have 25. 2 of those are pumping seepage water from the Lemoore Canal back into the canal to help mitigate groundwater along the canal and the adjacent developments. Many of the other pump stations are pumping the water from the detention basins into the canal or the various ditches within the city. These are the existing storm drain basins that the city operates at this point. If you see, the blue ones are detention basin, which are the predominant basins you have within the city to manage stormwater. You only have a couple of retention basins, one small one down on near the golf course south of Iona, and one out by West Hills College, which is really temporarily retention basin. It's eventually to be a detention basin.
Which one is that?
The one out by West Hills College, the larger red area.
You said it was,
That's currently a retention basin. The college pumps into it, but it has no outlet at this point, but it will eventually.
is that planned to stay there, or is it something that could be moved?
Right now, the plan is for it to stay there, do some expansion, and add some more another pump station to pump out of that basin.
There's a blue line below there on that map. That's a line that the college put in, the taxpayers put in with the bond, and a pumping station on both sides of that.
Right. Existing pump station on the north side, yes.
Right. Just wondered if considered moving something like that, create more economic development from the college there and residences there around that.
So that's also a well location. So when we have to purge and dump wells, we need areas for that water. There has been talk about maybe extending that out to hit the Fox ditch, but I think we're going to address that down the road. So
Right.
there is talk about it, but the reason it's there now, I believe, is to handle the well flushings and when the well came online.
It's also being incorporated into some of the development there, but that's what we're looking at right now. The city has 2 large disposal areas. One is the West Hills College Conservation Area, which is mainly operated by the West Hills College and does accept some water from some future residential developments along the north side of Bush. It's about a 55-acre site. It does have some additional capacity, but that would be subject to other negotiations, discussions with West Hills College. The biggest one, obviously, is the big area to the southwest of the West Hills College, which is the drainage disposal area. That's almost 800 acres of easement that the city has for disposal of stormwater. Next slide. These are the existing drainage problem areas that we have within the city. We've got together with city staff, went through, looked at all the areas that they saw ponding problems during rain events. You're probably more aware than I am about most of these. You probably heard about them. So we identified 18 of them. So if you can see the tags on them, they're numbered, and they are listed in the storm drain management master plan with recommendations for addressing those issues. So these are the ones, the improvements that we were talking about for the existing drainage issues and problems we have within the city of Lemoore. The downtown high school basin, which is expansion of the basin, some additional pipelines in Lemoore Avenue in that area, and a pump station, which would help some of the downtown D Street area, and some expansions, also some operational connections taking off the Fox ditch and going to the Lemoore Canal. The agricultural and commercial flooding improvements. Those are some pipeline improvements out near along the Fox Ditch alignment west of 41. And then the Hess Basin drainage facilities, which are some pipeline basin improvements and some other also Fox Ditch improvements and operational improvements to manage the stormwater. And then also the localized ponding that we looked at on that one map with all the yellow areas. This is to take care of the rest of those, about at $1.5 million. So the total is about $5.2 million of improvements to handle the existing deficiencies in the system. The next slide basically shows the improvements for, does show some of the existing improvements. So if you can tell, and it's difficult here, and I'll try to point a little bit, but here's some of the high school and downtown improvements. The orange lines are some of the existing improvements or improvements for existing deficiencies. And taking that in, so the pump station at the basin and also the some transition from the Fox Ditch to Lemoore Canal, some of the Fox Ditch improvements out here by West Hills College, and then the area down in, can't even see it from here, but right in this area for Hess Basin. As far as future growth, we looked at basically two areas. Area one is the area near West Hills College, west of 41. And that covers expansion of that particular existing basin we just discussed, addition of a pump station to pump out of that basin into the drainage area to the southwest of the college. So that's what that's handling. And then area two is the area up to the north of the city limits, basically from the north of the city limits to the to Lacey Boulevard. And this thing is area two. It's got sub areas 2A through 2F. 2A and B will go to the A ditch through detention basins and pump stations, and 2C through 2F will have detention basins and be pumped to discharge to the Lemoore Canal. Is the current plan for that. So those two, area one, area two, is the primary growth areas in the city. The cost for those, we looked at area one around the college, is about 1.1 million. The area two, sub areas 2A and 2B, which go to the A1 ditch, are about 2.6 million, and sub areas 2C through 2F about 3.8. Total is about $7.5 million for total improvements for future growth. So obviously, what's the next way we do? How do we finance that? Typically for growth inducing improvements, those are handled through development impact fees. And so we did a preliminary estimate there, shows that for the storm drain, the impact fee might be about $1,400 per single family residence and about $6,300 per acre. The next steps after approval of the master plan would be to go through an impact fee study to determine what those impact fees would be. So that is a real quick overview of the storm drain master plan. Next, we're going to turn this over to Carollo, unless you had a particular question right now.
Just a quick question on the last slide there when you're talking about the fees generated.
Okay.
Is that the only source of fees? In other words, we do charge for sewer and water.
You do have impact fees, yes,
Right.
for storm and sewer and water. This is to be an expansion of those, because we're expanding the improvements in the growth
That would be
area.
another source to add to this, or you include
It would typically it would replace your existing impact fees with this particular impact fee.
Yeah, we currently collect impact fees, and if you look on this slide, the current fees as they are today will generate about 4.1 million towards future expansion. So we're gonna have to look at potentially looking at our impact fees to fund this 100%. But the storm drain has to come in from the impact fees we collect from storm drain. We can't take other impact fees to subsidize this project. It has to be the impact fees related to stormwater.
So we could bond this.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah.
Like we did with water. Absolutely.
So,
Yes.
With that, I'm going to turn it over to Carollo. I'm not sure who's taking over first. And Carollo, you're going to have to let clerk know when to change the slides for you.
Can do. Everybody, this is Ryan Orgel with Carollo Engineers. As Jeff mentioned, I've got Joaquin Ramirez and John Witter from Carollo also with me, and they'll be helping me out with this presentation. So if we could pull the slides up. I think there's a little bit of a delay on our end, so I apologize in advance if we're a little behind the 8 ball on the slide transitions. Yeah, it kind of seems like we got a delay. There we go. Okay. Perfect. So if you could hit the next slide, please. Okay, so we kind of talked about this a little bit on the storm drain side, but so the scope of work for Carollo as part of this project was to develop a water system master plan as well as a wastewater system master plan, which consisted of 2 components. A collection system evaluation as well as a wastewater treatment plant evaluation, and then obviously pulling it all together into a CIP. So if you can hit the next slide, please. So the goals and objectives are fairly similar to the storm drain master plan. We wanted to determine the necessary capital and maintenance improvements for the water and sewer systems, and we'll share exactly how we did that. We also wanted to evaluate discharge alternatives for the wastewater treatment plant effluent, so that's something that John's going to get into. To determine the potential recycled water demands and how those could be potentially served in the future. And then also to evaluate treatment alternatives for a new wastewater treatment plant. Next slide. So our work was consistent with other planning efforts. So the basis of our master plans was, number 1, the city's general plan update. And so we went through and documented all of the information that we knew based off of the information provided in the general plan. If you can hit the next slide, as well as future known developments that have been specifically identified by the city. So this map shows areas of known near-term developments that are set to happen within the city in the near term. As Jeff had mentioned, there's some bigger areas on the west side of town, as well as sort of there to the north of the city limits, kind of the 2 hotspot areas with some infill developments considered as well. Next slide. So the first piece of it that I wanted to get into is the water master plan. The first thing that we did with the water master plan was to determine what the existing and future demands would be for the city. There's a little bit of a complication in doing that analysis, and the fact that system demands have fluctuated in recent years, particularly associated with the 2014 drought conditions. So we had to do a sensitivity analysis on that data and determine what we wanted to consider the existing and the future demand projections, and those are shown here on the graphic. So the purple line is going to be the baseline average day demands, and then the red line is going to be the projected. Well, actually, I'll take that back. So there's 2 different demand sets within the city. There's your industrial, and then there's your domestic demands. So the blue line is going to be the historical and projected industrial demands through 2040. The purple is your domestic demands, and then the red line is going to be the total demands, combining the 2 together. We use the dark red line in the middle of that sort of shaded area as our projected future demand for the city. So based off of that, you can see current conditions. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, good question.
Sure.
You know what the actual is?
Yeah, if you go back 1 slide real quick. So the actual, like I said, varied throughout the previous years. And you see the red line on the left with the dots on it, that's your historical demand. So you can see it ranged from a low of 4.5 about back in 2000-ish time frame to a high of about 7 MGD in 2013. And so most of the drop that we saw from 2014 to 2017 was state mandated drought reductions. And so there is expected to be a little bit of a bounce back from those demands. And so when we're evaluating the capacity of a water distribution system, we want to make sure that it's sized to handle, reasonable demands that we could see in the future. So we took a low end demand projection and a high end demand projection and sort of picked a happy medium as what we were projecting moving forward. And in order to actually evaluate the capacity of the system, we used the water system hydraulic model to evaluate it under different scenarios. So similar to the storm drain system, we evaluated the performance of the distribution system under current conditions, as well as projected year 2040 and build out conditions. And we ran it for several different demand conditions. So we looked at it under your max day demand conditions, which would be the highest demand condition on a summer day. We also looked at max day demand plus fire flow conditions, which essentially is there to make sure that your pipelines are adequately sized to meet fire demands throughout the distribution system. Next slide, please. And so planned projects were included in the existing system evaluation. And like I said, we evaluated this under max peak hour demand conditions as well as fire flow conditions. And the city has done a lot of work on the supply side for the water system, as you well know. A lot of work has been done on the treatment plant side and installing new wells and things like that. So a lot of the work had been done in advance. The one item or the main driver for the existing system improvements for the water system is driven by fire flow. So those are typically smaller water mains within residential neighborhoods that are just undersized to meet the required fire flow demands. So essentially the bulk or the entirety of the existing system improvements for the Lemoore water system are driven by upsizing small water mains to meet fire flow requirements. We also planned out water main alignment, potential water main alignments to extend the distribution system out to the known growth areas. So the lines shown in green here are going to be projects that would be utilized to extend the water service to new development through 2040. And if you look at the next slide, we also created a water system grid through build out of the distribution system. And I planned out the pipelines that would be associated with that, as well as future tanks and wells that would be associated with that growth as well. I believe that should be on the next slide. Yeah. So these are all post 2040 improvements, and they're shown in green on this slide. Next slide, please. So that is a brief overview of the water distribution system analysis. I will wrap it up with a summary of the capital improvement costs at the end. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Joaquin to discuss the wastewater collection system evaluation.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. This is Joaquin Ramirez. I just want to say good evening, council members, staff members. So I helped out with the wastewater master plan itself, and I'll be presenting forth here. So future wastewater flows were also based on historic trends. So again, we looked at historic trends and we really established a high range and a low range for wastewater flows. Now this historic trend is based off of wastewater flows entering the treatment plant itself. So similar to the water, the low flows are really reflective of conservation efforts and really wouldn't reflect what future flows would be. As Ryan said, once mandates are lifted, water usage will increase, flows will start increasing. And then the high range itself is really pre-drought conditions. And we suspect that the city of Lemoore really won't go back to those flows just because of of our awareness and the technology out there. So what we wanted to do was establish a baseline, and that kind of falls in between the high range and the low range. We didn't want to establish something that was too conservative or too low. So we came up with a what we consider a baseline that we think the city will achieve under future flow conditions. And that's basically reflected in the red to the right of the historic data itself. Next slide, please. Next, oh, there we go, right here, okay. So peak flows were applied to the collection system model to identify deficiencies. So again, once we established the future flow criteria, we were able to develop not only existing conditions within the model itself, but we developed 2040 projection flows and build out projection flows. Now within the sewer hydraulic model, again, we look at average dry weather flows, and then we look at peak flow conditions. So under the peak flow conditions, we really want to stress the system and determine if the collection system can handle peak flows. And if not, what mitigations would be required. But one thing I want to point out with the sewer model itself is, as you see on this figure right here, the blue lines represent pipelines, but then you have this large area of the city where there's really no pipelines extending to. And that's because we skeletonized the model, and what that refers to is we really only looked at pipelines 10 inches in diameter and larger. And that's pretty common for master planning. If we wanted to include the whole system, it would be very time consuming, as we'd have to input inverts for every single pipeline, and it'd just be very time consuming. And really looking at the mains itself is what we want to look at itself. Next slide, please. Deficiencies under existing conditions were found system-wide. So here we have a pipeline deficiency which extends from Bush Street and Vine Street down to the wastewater treatment plant itself. So that improvement recommends increasing the existing pipeline to a larger diameter. Down on the right-hand side, we have detail A. And what that shows is an ongoing project what the city has going. It's the abandonment of the Vera lift station, Carmel lift station, and constructing a lift station that is much larger. In addition to that, we identified the Avalon lift station, the Granary lift station, Bush Willow lift station, and Thomas lift station there as being capacity deficiency. So our recommendations for those would be to increase capacity to convey peak flows under wet weather conditions. Next slide, please. So improvements to gravity mains through 2040. So again, as the city expands, the wastewater generation increases. And what we're showing under 2040 conditions is as wastewater flows increase, the existing pipe diameters in certain areas are not large enough to convey flows. So you can see here in the yellow, we recommend some pipeline improvements in the east, kind of in the central in Bush Street. And then we have the Cimarron lift station recommended to be improved. So these recommendations are there to really assist with conveying flow and avoiding any sanitary, or potential, I should say, sanitary sewer overflows. Next slide, please. So several lift stations are needed to be expanded to support build-out conditions. So under this figure, this represents build-out conditions. And under build-out conditions, we consider the whole area and the planning area, which is the gray area, to be developed. So as you see, we have the green pipelines extending beyond the city limits. And then we have a number of lift stations recommended. So these lift stations are recommended to overcome canals or potential low points within the system. Because the issue with sewer is that a majority of the system is gravity. So we have to find we have to connect to the existing system. So if we develop upstream and move downstream to the connecting system, sometimes we're a lot lower and we need lift stations to lift that sewer flow up and connect to the existing system. The purple pipelines in this figure represent improvements under build-out conditions. So this is improvements to the existing system and would basically increase the existing diameter. And that conducts the wastewater collection system. Next, I'll pass it on to John Witter, who worked on the wastewater treatment evaluation for the master plan.
Thank you, Joaquin, and thanks again to council for giving us the opportunity to present to you guys tonight. So first, I wanted to mention the drivers for the wastewater treatment plant evaluation. So a little bit different than for the distribution system and the collection system, where we look at the capacity of the pipelines and the condition of the infrastructure. That's important for the wastewater treatment plant, but one of the main things that drives upgrades for the treatment process are forthcoming regulations and regulatory requirements. So what we're showing here is the overview of the existing system. So the city of Lemoore and Leprino have separate wastewater treatment facilities, but they combine their effluent and operate under a shared discharge permit. And historically, the combined effluent has been out of compliance with the discharge requirements as it relates to EC, or electrical conductivity, which is essentially a measure of the salinity in the water. And so as a result, Leprino purchased land noted here as Stone Ranch and contracted with the city to discharge their combined effluent to this new location, which has different underlying groundwater quality and has a different salt tolerance. So the regional board has permitted this combined effluent to go to this new discharge location. So this has brought the combined effluent back into compliance, but it has not changed the treatment process or improved the effluent quality from previously. So one of the things—
Where's the new discharge location on that map?
So if you go back to the previous slide, the old discharge location was at the end of the existing pipeline, just west of the river where we showed the pump station. If you can go back a slide, please.
I see it by Stone Ranch there.
Oh, I'm seeing the next slide table.
Theirs went back, but yours didn't. Let me
I
get
see.
it. There you go.
Yeah, so in 2018 and previously, the city was discharging to Westlake, an irrigation canal, which is on the southwest portion of this figure. And the new discharge location is Stone Ranch, indicated by the green outline there.
Up north.
And so I believe the city is currently discharging the combined effluent with Leprino's effluent to Stone Ranch now.
So the new discharge location is in the green dotted area?
Yeah, so the effluent from the city combines with Leprino's effluent, and it's used to irrigate salt tolerant crops within Stone Ranch.
It's located east of NAS Lemoore, and its northern boundary is almost to Grangeville. And it starts probably several miles north of 198.
Thank you.
So, so this new discharge location brings the city's effluent back into compliance, but there are other regulatory drivers that should be considered when looking at the performance of the existing treatment process. Most notably is basin plan amendments that the regional board is adopting, has recently adopted the framework which allows the regional board to develop nutrient limits for dischargers in the Central Valley. And so that is currently in the works, and depending on the priority zone of the dischargers dictates the timeline by which dischargers will need to comply with new limits, but stricter limits as it relates to nutrients, most notably nitrate, will be forthcoming in the next several years. And so we looked, with that in mind, we looked at how the existing treatment process would be able to comply with these stricter limits. And there are deficiencies in the existing process as it relates to complying with future regulations. So like I said, it meets current regulations, but we don't anticipate that the existing pond-based treatment plant will be able to comply with these stricter new limits. For what we're showing here, organics and solids, and also for nutrients and nitrogen compounds. So with that in mind, one of the objectives of this treatment plant was to evaluate alternative wastewater treatment processes that would be able to serve the city over the planning horizon over the next 20 years. So on the next slide, we show a typical process flow diagram for a treatment plant that would be able to meet stricter discharge limits. And so we evaluated alternatives for every one of these processes. So from a high level, it's the secondary process, which serves the biological treatment, tertiary, and the solids handling. And I'll get into a couple of these. So on the next slide, we hone in on the secondary process, which is the biological process that is the main element that we focus our design around to be able to meet the organics and solids limits that we are anticipating. And so on the next slide, we look at what are the alternative secondary processes capable of meeting these limits. So on the bottom, you'll see the land-based system, which is the current process that is Lemoore's treatment plant. They have facultative ponds, which is able to meet organics limits, but it certainly is not, facultative ponds were never intended to be able to achieve nitrogen removal. And so this requires an upgrade to look at different processes. So the suspended growth alternatives is the only technology that's capable of meeting the strict nutrient and organics limits that are forthcoming. And so you'll see 3 different alternatives that we evaluated here. So I believe we have an animation if you click next. The oxidation ditch, conventional activated sludge, and the membrane bioreactor were the 3 secondary alternatives that we compared for this master plan. So on the next slide, you'll see the analysis that we developed for these 3 alternatives. We developed a financial analysis, and the financial analysis includes the capital cost for the secondary elements, as well as the annual operation and maintenance. So the capital cost is for the new infrastructure for basins and pumps and equipment required to construct the facility. And the annual operation and maintenance includes things like the power to run the pumps and the labor for operations and equipment maintenance and things like that. And comparing these 3 alternatives, the oxidation ditch not only has the lowest capital cost of the 3 alternatives that we considered, but it also has the lowest O&M cost. So it has the lowest life cycle cost over 20 years. So that is the financial analysis for the secondary process. And then on the non-financial analysis, we look at things that are not cost related. So obviously cost is very important when it comes to determining the treatment process, but it doesn't tell the whole picture. We want to make sure that the treatment process also aligns with the objectives of the city. So for example, we look at things like the ease of operation and maintenance and reliability of the process. And again, the oxidation ditch is the preferred alternative when it comes to the non-financial analysis as well. It is an easier process to operate than the other 2, the activated sludge and the membrane bioreactor. And so as we transition from a land-based system to a mechanical treatment process, it's important to have a system that is easier to operate to ensure that the system has the greatest chance of success for continued operation and being able to meet discharge permits. So the secondary process is the main biological component, but then transitioning into tertiary treatment. So tertiary treatment consists of filtration and disinfection, and tertiary treatment is not required to meet anticipated discharge requirements. or limits, but tertiary treatment is what is included to produce recycled water. And going into this project, we understood that there is a driver for analyzing a potential recycled water system. And so tertiary treatment allows you to produce disinfected tertiary recycled water for unrestricted reuse. And so there's two main parts of the recycled water analysis that we looked at. One is the quantity, so balancing the recycled water demands with the flows anticipated through the planning horizon. So on the next slide, you will see a preliminary map that we looked at. So this was developed now maybe almost 2 years ago now. And this is supposed to be, a high level cursory look at what are the potential green spaces within the city. So we identified things like schools, cemeteries, parks, churches, the golf course, West Hills as a list of potential places that may be able to receive recycled water. And we only identified, or for this analysis, we had only identified turf grass irrigation, but there are certainly other possibilities for recycled water, whether it's industrial uses or other agricultural end uses. And so looking at the demands based on the area of recycled water uses, recycled water space, and matching that with the wastewater flows, there's certainly a justification for producing or developing a recycled water system based on the sizes of the demands and the production. But the water balance doesn't tell the entire story. The other thing that we want to look at is the quality of water coming from the treatment plant. So what we're showing here is a guideline for different constituents that we look at. So we can implement new treatment processes that can remove biological constituents within the water. But one of the main things that's important to consider with recycled water is the mineral content. So minerals, think of salts and sodium, chloride, things like that. Those are inert compounds that cannot be removed biologically. So it requires a separate treatment process to physically remove these salts from the water. And they then are concentrated into a waste stream that needs to be dealt with. So comparing the effluent quality to standard guidelines, there are a couple parameters that indicate that the salinity in the effluent would be detrimental, could potentially be detrimental to apply onto certain crops or turf grass. And so if you click next, one of the main things that we're here are issues with the sodium absorption ratio and electrical conductivity and the sodium concentrations. And so this is something that certainly needs to be evaluated in further detail before implementing a recycled water system. And one of the things we looked at for the master plan on the next slide is what are the alternatives that would be required to what are the range of scenarios that would be required to be able to address this concern? So the first alternative is if we can use the recycled water on salt tolerant crops and we can dilute the wastewater with potable water and we don't need to add a separate treatment process to remove the minerals, then we just need to add filtration and disinfection. Then that alternative is about $5.8 million of capital cost. But if we do need to add a demineralization process such as reverse osmosis or an RO system to remove the salts, then that's an additional treatment process that would require a capital cost and annual operation and maintenance. And then there are other considerations for dealing with the brine produced from that RO system. So depending on the permitting ability of where that brine can go, if that can be discharged to Stone Ranch, like the current wastewater is being discharged, then what we're showing here is the cost just for the 3 treatment processes. So, and that has a cost of 20 million roughly from our cost estimate. And then kind of the worst case scenario is if you have to implement the demineralization process and deal with the brine treatment to essentially achieve a zero liquid discharge. So you have evaporation ponds where you have to remove all the water and you're left with essentially like a crystalline salt that then needs to be landfilled. And that would cost roughly $65 million in capital cost. And so from this analysis, we determined that it was having to move forward with demineralization was cost prohibitive for the recommended project for the treatment plant analysis. So on the next slide, we show the recommended proposed facility layout from the results of the alternatives analysis for the entire project. So we're showing the new secondary process, which is the oxidation ditch and secondary clarifiers with disinfection. So the current permit requires disinfection to meet your discharge requirements, and then some solids handling, mechanical dewatering for your to deal with the solids that are produced from the secondary process. And then on the next slide, we show how those processes would be implemented into the existing site. So the two vertical north-south ponds that we're showing there. These are your four treatment ponds currently. The two that are highlighted in blue, we identified those could be converted to effluent percolation ponds. So if you wanted to separate your effluent disposal from Lemoore, you could percolate your wastewater on site through roughly the area that's highlighted in blue. And then the two east-west ponds would be decommissioned and converted to be able to construct the new mechanical treatment processes on top of that. And so this is what we're showing the footprint would be for the new oxidation ditch and treatment facilities associated with that analysis. And then on the next slide, we show the recommended project costs for all treatment elements. So I mentioned the secondary treatment process, which is the main component, but there's other components on top of that. The headworks, which removes the large debris and rags and things like that. And then the screw press, which is the mechanical dewatering, and some site infrastructure that's needed to support the conversion to the new treatment plant. So the pond demolition and pump station. And so we're showing a capital construction cost for the recommended project at about $41 million, with annual O&M anticipated to be about between $600,000 and $700,000 for a 20-year life cycle cost of around $51 million. And next, I'll hand it back to Ryan to summarize the capital improvement plan for all three elements that we evaluated.
Yeah, there's just 3 short slides at the end, if you could find those. Go through these real quick because I know we're going a bit long here.
Go to the bottom. Just go to the very end.
So just to wrap this discussion up, we talked about a lot of infrastructure projects associated with the water and sewer master plans, as well as the treatment plant. On the water side, this table shows a breakdown of cost by phase through 2040. So the first phase, we have a total of $5.2 million of projects on the water side, 2.4 in phase 2, which is 24 to 2028, and then post 2029, we have another $9.3 million of projects. Now, those are a mixture of existing user costs plus impact costs that would be borne by the developer through impact fees. Next slide. On the collection system side, we have a little bit higher costs initially, just due to the number of improvements that were the large trunk sewer improvement that Joaquin had mentioned. So there's $12.8 million there in phase 1, 3.2 in phase 2. And post 2030, there's $13.1 million. Again, those are a mixture of existing and future user costs. So that would be a combination of existing ratepayers plus costs that would be borne by the developers. Next slide. And then John hit on this last one quite a bit in terms of the cost for the treatment plant. So we have a targeted initial phase for the treatment plant design of the 2024 to 2028 timeframe, with construction of the actual treatment plant in the 2029 to 2040 scenario. So there's about $50 million set aside for that. Last slide just shows a breakdown of the cost between the three different systems. By far, the highest cost is the wastewater treatment plant, followed by the collection system. And the relatively small piece of the water system reflects the amount of work that you've already done on that system. So there was less capital costs that have been targeted for that piece. So I think that takes us to the end of our presentation. Again, thank you for the time. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to field them now.
Sorry for the length of that. We're trying to fly through most of that as we could, but if you have any questions, we're available for that. Kind of the next steps would be to bring these back to you for consideration and approval with the appropriate environmental document to go with it. And then right after that would be going into an impact fee study to analyze the impact fees that are required to support these improvements.
And just a couple questions. You had mentioned during the presentation you use models or model.
Yes.
How confident are you in those models and projecting this information?
Yeah, I can field that question. So as part of the water model and the sewer model development, we actually did an extensive calibration process that was associated with that. So for the water system, we went through and collected SCADA data for high demand periods. I think back in, it was probably 2018-ish when we did that. We also deployed field data recorders called pressure loggers out in the system to actually record system pressures within the distribution system. So our modeling process was, number one, to build the model, allocate demands, and then calibrate it against the data that we collected as part of that process. So in terms of the water system, we have a good representation of what's in the ground now. With regards to the projections, those were all based off of information that we gleaned from your general plan. So, I mean, the future demand projections are as good as the general plan is, basically. So that was the best planning document that we had to fall back on in terms of projecting demand. But in terms of understanding current demands, our models are solid. On the sewer side, we did a similar approach. We actually contracted with a temporary flow monitoring sub-consultant to go out and put flow meters throughout the collection system. So I think we had about 15 of those deployed in the system, where we're actually collecting flows within specific pipes in the system, and we calibrated our model against that. So in that regard, again, we have good confidence that our model is representing what's happening for the existing system. And then the future system, again, is as good as the planning documents that the future flows were developed to reflect. So.
And just two more. Impact fees would be your only source of revenue for us to consider, or do you consider anything else?
That's the typical one used for development impact fees for these types of, for future growth. Any of the existing improvements that are to address existing deficiencies would have to be funded some other way.
Okay.
Not through the development impact fees. You might look at other resources for that. Might be the bonds, might be some other resources for that.
So council being, these are all enterprise accounts, they have to be supported by the end user. So yeah, between impact fees for development, the other route would be, as you mentioned earlier, would be to go out and bond. But for us to go out and bond would mean that we'd have to pass the repayment of that bond onto the ratepayers, which would require us to do a rate increase because we have to prove to the bondsman that we can pay it back. And that would be a direct, just like water. We bonded for $30 million in water and we passed increases to the end user over 4 years to pay for that bond. This would be something similar.
Yeah, a bond anticipation note or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and then as well as any, if any grant monies become available or federal funding for stuff, we're always looking for those opportunities as
Yeah.
well.
Then, we sit on the South Kings River groundwater, number of other, anyway, we're getting very familiar with that. How has this impacted that, or do we know yet in terms of?
I don't think at this point we know yet exactly how that, unless Nathan has some input.
Yeah, that's still a blueprint in work. So we have to be water neutral, or I guess by 2040. So there's a lot of implementation coming. So anything that the GSA does to develop, well, they've already developed the groundwater sustainability plan, but the implementation, that'll be above and beyond what the city's doing. Now, if we can get some recycled water going on here, we may be able to partner on that plan and kind of
Recharge, yeah.
yeah. So like for recharge, if we're recharging by using water on the golf course and other entities that we have above and beyond what we're currently doing, we should be able to get credits, which the GSA, the South Forth King, should be able to get credits because we're within their jurisdiction. So we'll kind of muddle our way through that as we go. But I do think good projects that fall in under the GSA or the implementation plan, there could be funding through some additional funding, not just on city, if it helps the group as a whole meet water sustainability.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you for your patience. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on, we're going to go into closed session. This item has been set aside for the city council to meet in closed session to discuss matters pursuant to government code section 54956.9D4. The city attorney will provide an oral report regarding closed session at the beginning of the next regular city council meeting. 1, conference with labor negotiator, government code section 54957.6, agency designated representatives, Mary Lerner, city attorney, and Michelle Spear, assistant city manager, employee organizations, General Association of Service Employees, Lemoore Police Officers Association, Lemoore Police Sergeants Unit, and Police Professional Services Bargaining Unit, unrepresented. And that's it. We are in closed session. Okay, this is our 7:30 regular session. We're located at Lemoore City Council Chambers at 429 C Street, April 20th, 2021. So we're going to start off with our invocation and then stay standing after that. And we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. And we have Pastor Frank giving invocation tonight.
Praise God, we're so thankful for you, your love for us. I want to thank you for the council members, for the work they do, for they serve this community. And I pray tonight for wisdom, for unity. Father, you'll give them direction. May, Father, they accomplish those things on the agenda that need to be accomplished. We ask it in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Okay, ready? Salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Pastor Frank, thank you very much, young man. And just so, in case I forget, next time, come up to the mic and speak it into the mic. That way we could all hear you at home. So you have a good night. Thank you, sir.
Sure they heard him.
Okay, so roll call.
Councilmember Orr,
Here.
Councilmember Gornick,
Here,
Councilmember Cheney,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Matthews,
Here.
Mayor Lyons.
Here.
Thank you.
Wow, we're on a roll. How about
3 meetings in a row.
that? So closed session report.
Nothing to report, Mayor and Council.
Okay. Agenda approval, additions and or deletions. None? Okay. So this is public comment. The public comment will be in accordance with the attached policy. This time is reserved for members of the audience to address the city council on items of interest that are not on the agenda and are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. It is recommended that the speaker limit their comments to 3 minutes. And it is requested that no comments be made during this period on items on the agenda. The council is prohibited by law from taking any action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda. Prior to addressing the council, any handouts for council will be provided to the city clerk for distribution to the council and appropriate staff. So do I have any public comment at this time? No public comment? Wow. It's not very often Mr. Reed's in the audience and doesn't say something. Marissa, do you have anything? No, none. Okay. Oh, must be doing a good job. How about that? Ceremonial presentations, no ceremonies, presentations, and we'll move on to department and city manager reports.
Frank, did you have an update on the TKHM?
Good evening. I just have, I want to briefly update you on the water treatment plant projects. As you know, last meeting, I told you that the startup and commissioning was in process. That's still happening. So right now, the brunt of the work is happening at well site number 7, which is at West Hills campus location. Right now, the media, resins, gravel is being topped up to the maximum capacity of the tanks. Then they'll be actually filled with water in preparation for wet testing, like on May 3rd, about May 3rd time. And then also the 2 booster pumps at the well site number 11, which are new, were tested this week. And so water was pumped down the existing 18-inch line to the 40G Street tank, and everything was successful. So things are going well. So they're kind of on schedule for this time of the year. That's it.
Thank you, Frank. And I might add, out there by West Hills, when we start testing at well site 7 there, we're going to be using that water reserve area for a lot of waters coming out. We can't send this water forward in the system.
are you paying the college for that?
Pardon me?
Are you paying the college for that?
No, it's going to go north of the road where we have some easements out there. So anyway, so you're going to have there's going to be quite a bit of water out there by the college here starting next month.
That's good.
So, and then, so I have a few updates. Again, good evening, Mayor and council members. So Kings County hit the orange tier. I'm sure most everybody's aware. So we're continually to get closer to normalcy, which is nice. The American Rescue Plan, everybody keeps asking me, and I got people calling me, how much money is the city going to get? What are we going to do with it? We still don't have word. We are considered a non-entitlement city due to our population being less than 50,000. So right now, the U.S. Department of basically the feds are waiting on the state of California to tell them how they're going to roll it out to our jurisdictions. So as of the email I got from the California cities last Friday, we still don't have direction on how we apply and how we get available funds and clear direction on what those funds can be used for. We have some ideas, but we're waiting for, so there's no miscommunications. We're waiting to have it tied up in a bow to just talk about publicly. That being said, Parks and Rec, we do have some indoor activities taking place. So indoor soccer and basketball clinics. If you go on the Facebook page to Lemoore Parks Recreation, the data is there and how to sign up. Sheila did tell me that the soccer clinics are filling super fast. So again, getting some normalcy back into the rec program over there. We did walk the golf course today with 5 interested parties that are looking for potentially taking the golf management of the golf course over. as soon as July 1. So the RFQ process is underway for that. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the consent calendar. Items considered routine in nature are placed on the consent calendar. They will be considered and voted upon in one vote as one item unless a council member or a member of the public requests individual consideration. 3-1, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of April 6th, 2021. 3-2, approval of the second reading resolution 2021-06 and ordinance 2021-02, approving planned unit development number 2020-03, the Fairway Courtyards tentative subdivision map number 2020-02, and major site plan review number 2020-05. 3-3, approval of the budget amendment for technical planning services. So does anybody on the council want to poll any member? Yes, Mr. Gornick.
3.2, please.
3-2. Would anybody else like to pull any other items? Seeing none, would anyone from the public like to pull either 3-1 or 3-3? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent calendar for 3-1 and 3-3.
I'll make a motion.
Mrs. Matthews.
I'll second it.
Okay, Mrs. Matthews,
Aye, sorry.
Mr. Orr,
Aye.
Mr. Gornick,
Aye.
Mr. Cheney.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. So 3-1 to 3-3 passes. So 3-2, who's going to take that?
Councilmember Gornick, was there any additional information on that item or is it pulled for voting purposes?
Just additional information. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, I should have stated that when I,
okay. I just wasn't sure if we had to get Mr. Brand or Judy up there.
no. But the, I almost asked the gentleman who was presenting the storm drain information, because I noticed on the J.J. Gardner project north of Iona, he had a blue line that appeared to come all the way over to this new project, right?
Okay,
Stormwater.
yeah, I'm not familiar with the details of the stormwater master plan, but I'll believe you.
Well, my question was this,
Yeah,
and it's that stormwater area that we have
yeah.
adjacent to the 18th green. Okay. And I guess my thought was, why can't we add another home to be built? And instead of having a ponding basin on that
Pipe it out.
property and pipe it right into that. And that was my only thought, is that, if they're, that was it, basically. I don't know if that is feasible, or is that something you guys can work on?
I'm only speaking conceptually because I like I said, I did look at the stormwater master plan, but it was probably about 6 months ago. What you're suggesting makes sense. Do you know the details of it, Frank?
I think you might be talking about that small basin.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
That
Right.
basin is set aside for the subdivision. All the water in the subdivision is designed to flow to that small basin.
Sorry, Frank, real quick, for clarification, when you say the small basin, I think Mr. Gornick was referring to the basin right next to the 18th green, not what we have in the plans for the subdivision.
So that's just kind of the part of the Gulf feature that, so the plan is to use those areas for tertiary water. Isn't that correct? That's, I think.
Down the road eventually, yes.
Yeah, eventually, I think the first pond there will be the first pond that'll actually collect tertiary water from the wastewater plant, if everything works out right. And then I believe there's a network where all those water hazard areas are kind of interconnected by a pipeline. And so I believe once you fill one of those, you probably fill maybe a couple of them. So to get rid of them will probably ruin our plan as far as,
Okay.
but yeah, we
Yeah.
can talk more about that.
No, well, I mean, talk to the builder about it. I just thought it might be a way to just increase another house to be built
Another
and
unit.
go from there. So that's all.
So Mr.
you.
Gornick, are you good?
I'm good, yeah.
Okay, so I need to open it to the public to let them comment. Didn't even let me get there.
Sorry, Tommy, before I have any more, specific of that little ponding basin, if you will, I don't think that's big enough to do a house. It's not nearly wide enough.
Okay,
So that might help you.
thank you.
Any more public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council. So I'm gonna go ahead and look for a motion to accept Oh, I take it back. All right, we'll let Jennifer Solis say her thing.
You guys are so kind. Sorry, I was just about to text everybody like, wait. This might be more of a question for the builder, but I did notice on the layout for the homes, the ones that are facing the golf course, how the layout of the home is. There is no living area that's actually facing the golf course. It's like bedrooms and bathrooms and things like that. And that might be a builder thing, but I'm not sure if that would be changed by the council. Because I'm thinking like the point of being on the golf course and having a wrought iron fence is to be able to kind of see the view. And so it just seemed odd to me. So thank you.
Thank you. If you would like, yeah.
As far as the layouts of the home, obviously these are very narrow lots. And so to switch layouts of the home to have the living area in the back would probably be very difficult just with, these houses had to be specially designed to fit with the garage on the one side, when you pull in. So predominantly it's the kitchen and living areas towards the front, just space wise and layout wise. So to reverse that would be probably not
Beyond that.
it wouldn't suit the home, I guess, in the
Okay.
design that we already have going. As far as talking about the ponding basin, obviously, if there's an opportunity to build another home, we're all for that. Like we said, we'd have to look into the dimensions, and I know the infrastructure is already run there, so it could be a large cost to fill in that basin and rerun a lot of the infrastructure that's already been done. But that is definitely something that could be considered. We'd love to build more homes.
Okay. Thank you. Any other public comment?
I'm reading again. Having them backing up to the golf course like that with the living areas in the back, if you will, that's not any different from all the other houses that are adjacent to the golf course.
Okay. Does anybody else in the public have any comment? Seeing none, I'm gonna bring it back to council.
Motion to accept 3-2.
Mr. Orth, I have a motion. I need a second.
I'll second.
And Mrs. Matthews. So Mr. Orth,
Aye.
Mr. Gornick,
No,
Mr. Cheney,
Aye.
Mrs. Matthews.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. And so 3-2 passes. So moving on, public hearing, section 4.1, public hearing, first reading, resolution 2021-07, approving general plan amendment number 2021-01 and ordinance 2021-03, approving zoning map amendment number 2021-01, changing the zoning map from Parks and Recreation to professional office for property location at the northeast corner of 19th Avenue, 19th and a half Avenue, and Cedar Lane in the city of Lemoore. Mr. Brandt.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. This is an application proposed by KCAL LLC. They're looking to purchase the property. The property is actually owned by the city right now. It is designated and zoned for future park. In the general plan, this site was shown as a possible relocation site for the Little League fields. Since that time, I think the thinking has changed in the Parks Department about how to handle the Little League fields. And so this site is being proposed to be changed to allow offices here instead. And then the site would be available for sale from the city to a builder. The Planning Commission reviewed this at a public hearing and recommended approval. So you can see on the zoning map here, the left map shows, oh, sorry, okay, no, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm really looking at the wrong site. The left map shows the existing zoning, and then the right map shows what it would be if the project was approved. So you'd see the one site changing from the green to the kind of pink color, which is the office designation color. So there's no development project proposed on this site, specific development project. So this is just a reminder of the current city site plan review process. Any project that has a development of over 20,000 square feet of building space would be a major site plan review, and that would go to the Planning Commission for their review. Anything less than 20,000 square feet is considered minor site plan review, and it's reviewed at the staff level only. So our recommendation is that you open a public hearing to accept testimony, and then our recommendation would be to approve the resolution for the general plan amendment and the ordinance for the zoning map amendment.
Okay. I'm sorry,
I'm done.
you're done.
Do you have any questions?
Anybody on council have any questions?
What, if somebody were to come in there either with a 20,000 square feet and above or below, what kind of street improvements would be required of them?
They need to build out the street to the full width on there along the frontage of the site. So
On both sides? So it looks to me like there's one on Cedar and then also on 19 and a half, right?
is the street?
Cedar's there.
Well, Cedar stops short, so it would have to be curb gutter sidewalk would be extended out to 19th and a
Yeah,
half.
if there's any place along the frontage of the site that does not have curb gutter and sidewalk, it would be built with the development.
Okay, so,
That's a standard for any site in the city.
but abutting a 19th and a half, so the west side of the site.
The
What
west
happens?
side of the street would not be, because the standard policy of the city is that the developer builds adjacent to their frontage. So if you're on one side of the street and both sides are not fully developed, you build your side, and then when the other developer on the other side of the street builds, then they build their side.
And would they have to tie the sidewalk in all the way 19th and a half, all the way up, or no?
Usually you only build right along
Right
your
along
frontage.
right around, okay.
If there's an opportunity to make a connection, we're always looking for that. Sometimes it's hard. You have to look at when you're requiring the developer to build
More than his
public
share.
facilities.
Yeah.
Yes, it's more than your fair share. The law calls it a nexus. You have to have a connection between because the new project is causing the need for those improvements. So if there's a nexus, then the city can require that to be built. We can't require them to build more than the need that they're providing.
Gotcha.
So let me get this straight. The street and the gutter and curb will go, what would be west from Cedar, from like where I think it's a retention pond, solar things, solar panels. It'd go west to 19th and
19 and a
a
half.
half. And then would they continue around the corner and go north
No.
to the,
That's
auto
what I
wrecking?
asked. It would stop at the edge of their property.
so what would it look like going north on 9th and a quarter, 9th and a half, I'm sorry, 19th and a half towards, I think it's Hughes Auto Wrecking, or what would that? There'd be
Someone was-
no,
yeah,
there'd be no
someone was-
sidewalk there?
If someone was building the entire site out, yeah, put the map up. The aerial photo there.
There you
Yeah.
So yeah, so you can see 19 and a half does not have curb and gutter. So if somebody was building the entire site, they would build the curb and gutter and sidewalk adjacent to their west side and their south side of their site.
Okay, that was my question. Would they do
Yeah, so
curb and
if-
gutter?
Yeah.
north?
So it's
North,
hard. So this site actually consists of 3 parcels. We show it as one on here because this is the whole project site. But if you take the upper half or upper 2/3, that's a 6-acre parcel. So if he builds that first, that would trigger the development in front of that piece, which would be your upper left hand. There's a
Okay.
0.3 acre and a 2 something that makes up this other frontage. So all that will eventually get developed. And if you look way down at the bottom left-hand corner where you see that tree, you can't really see it, but there is sidewalk that terminates right there. It ends. So the alignment would basically pick up from that neighborhood to the south. You'd pick up that same alignment, and the AM, PM and them that are up there now, they've already done their infrastructure. So we would continue that alignment
Okay.
through this section.
But so it's 19 and a half is really kind of going to be about the same as it is right now.
No, once he develops the site, you'll have from the center line to the east, you'll have the road improvements, you'll have
Oh, yeah, on Cedar.
curb gutter, you'll have sidewalk. Yes, but on the west side, you'll have nothing. It'll stay the same.
That's right. It'll stay the
Until
same.
that-
Yes.
Yeah.
Until when?
Until that develops. Until that site
Oh.
develops.
Give us 3 years.
Well, but,
Judy?
but,
You're on the clock.
well, wait a minute now. Okay, so that stays the same until
Somebody develops it.
somebody else develops it, but is that a public easement, that space between the 19 and a half and that black and dotted line?
The space.
The black
Well,
and
there's
yellow
always
line.
some easements that come off, yes.
There-
So the curb gutter and sidewalk would actually be in a city easement.
Yeah, but who builds that?
The developer will, KCAL, the people that are asking for the zoning change. When they develop this, one of their conditions to develop will be to put the improvements along Cedar and 19th and a half,
Okay,
which
that-
will include curb, gutter, sidewalk.
okay, that's
Okay,
what
thank you.
that's what
That's
I
what we're
want to
asking,
know.
yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
want to know.
Okay.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
I think we're all thinking it. We're just not getting there the right way. But yes, it will be taken care of.
Good.
Yeah, we have that kind of a policy. The developer builds the streets in front of their development, so you don't have to pay for it.
Sure.
Okay, any other comments from council? Before I open it to public, okay, any public comment on, okay, public hearing? No? Marissa, do you have anything? Okay, I guess public hearing is closed. And bring it back to council, and we're going to yeah, it's, the motion is going to be to waive the first reading and accept resolution 2021-07 and the ordinance 2021-03, correct?
Right, yeah, you'd be introducing and waiving the first reading for that ordinance, 2021-03, and then also approving resolution 2021-07.
Would anybody like to make that motion?
So move.
Would say that?
So move.
Mr. Gornick. Okay, we got a motion. Need a second. Mr. Cheney. So, Mr. Gornick,
Yes.
Mr. Cheney,
Aye.
Mr. Orth,
Aye.
Mrs. Matthews.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. So that passes. Let's see. So new business and seeing none, we're on to brief city council reports and requests. Mr. Orth.
I'd like to thank our negotiators for the hard work they doing on our contract, working very hard for our city and for our employees, giving what we can. Thank you for the police, the fire, everything. Our city's looking good. Thank you. That's it.
I'd like to say the same. Thanks everybody for their hard work. We're on behalf of the city, all the staff and our employees, and that's it.
Mr. Cheney.
But thank city staff, especially the city attorney, the assistant city manager for all our hard work. And that's all I have.
Mrs. Matthews.
I'm actually going to keep it brief today.
Oh, wow, how about that?
Lots of things going on with Parks and Rec, like Nathan had said. So check out the Facebook page for all of that. I also want to thank PD. You guys have been very busy. I've heard a lot. You guys are doing your work and I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for keeping the neighborhood safe. Fire, thank you for all you do. And that's all I have.
Wow, I'm not prepared.
Mayor Lyons, I did forget one thing. The 23rd is the tree dedication for Officer Diaz at 11 a.m. And what was the name of the park in Hanford?
Centennial.
Hanford Centennial Park. So 11 o'clock this Friday. If anybody can join, we'd love to see you there.
Where's that city? Where's that park at?
Right off Hamper Road. Get off on that gate, Hamper Road.
So I figured. Thank you.
East of 12th.
Okay, so yeah, along with what everybody said, I kind of agree. The Parks and Rec and all of our city staff, our assistant city manager, she's, working hard for us. And so is the police department. Really want to appreciate them. And the Parks and Rec. So I keep getting complimented on how downtown looks. I mean, I didn't do it by myself. I'm kidding. Parks and Rec did it, obviously, and everyone else, all the planter boxes down there. A lot of people have taken a lot of notice, and I don't know, it kind of feels kind of good having positive feedback. I'll take it where I can get it. And with that being said, we're adjourned.